Well, welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have Francisco Veloso, Dean of INSEAD. Francisco, great to see you back at Indico. You were part of the beginning of Indico in some capacity, and nowadays you're the Dean of INSEAD, one of the greatest business schools in the world. So tell us, how did you get there? Tell us from the start.
From the start. It's interesting, where life takes us. But first, thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be back at Indico, as you said. It was nice to be in the early stages and see it wonderfully progressing. How do I get here? That's an interesting question because I was kind of a geek, interested in technology and innovation, and so I originally Portuguese, and so went into the Portuguese engineering school, Técnico, just around the corner from where actually we are.
Like me.
And studied, physics engineering. And then it was interesting because towards the end of the program, I started to ask questions. And I think my defining moment is probably when I was doing an internship in Germany in the Max Planck Institute for Nuclear Physics. And I was working with this very interesting experiment aboard some space probes, the Ulysses and the Galileo space probes. And I wondered kind of half the time, what is this technology for? How do you use it? How does it benefit society? And that was kind of a little bit of the beginning of this idea of discovery of innovation and entrepreneurship. Things at the time, we're talking about late 90s, were still a little bit diffuse concepts. But I kind of, got interested in that area. And then decided to do a PhD. I was always very academic. I'd been very involved in student government and student leadership and entrepreneurship early on through the Junitech here at Técnico. Then I did want to continue an academic career. And so I found this interesting PhD in the US called Technology Management and Policy that allowed me to build a little bit on the back of my technical expertise, but explore these issues of technology management and innovation that took me back to the US. And so I did my PhD there, worked in various topics of innovation, long time related to the automotive industry and the automotive supply chain. And then when I finished that,
Where did you do that?
At MIT.
At MIT.
And then I went to Carnegie Mellon as an assistant professor. So I did the typical route, applied to a bunch of places, got an offer to go to Carnegie Mellon, and then was there and again in an interdisciplinary department. It was actually based at the engineering school, but looking at these issues of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I taught in this area. I taught a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship to engineers, mostly what I did, which was fun. Created a master's in that area as well and a PhD. And then towards the end of my stay at Carnegie Mellon, there was this very interesting collaboration called the Carnegie Mellon Portugal program was created, and I was on the governance of that collaboration between Carnegie Mellon and several universities here in Portugal, including Técnico and Católica, with which we created kind of a joint PhD.
That was a super important program, actually.
And then out of that engagement got me progressively more involved back with Portugal. And then when the previous dean at Católica Lisbon stepped down, they invited me to become the dean there. And that got me back to Portugal after 15 years in the US.
Which year was this?
And this was 2012 when I came back.
Right at the peak of the crisis in Portugal.
Exactly. So, which was very interesting because for the first time as dean at Católica, I saw a lot of talents from the undergraduate that used to go to utilities, telecoms, banks here in Portugal, all of a sudden thinking that entrepreneurship is not all that risky after all, given what was happening around it. And I saw a huge boost on that movement towards during the 5 years that I was there at Católica, which is a very interesting phenomena, and to which I contributed, with pleasure, given my interests in these topics. And then 5 years after that, I got an opportunity to become the dean at Imperial College Business School, another very technical university like MIT and Carnegie Mellon. And I directed the business school there, did a lot of things related to entrepreneurship in London and at Imperial, involving creating the Institute for Deep Tech Entrepreneurship at Imperial College. And then 6 years after that, got the opportunity to become the dean at INSEAD. So it was a little bit of this movement back and forth between, Portugal, US, back to Portugal, into the UK, now based in France, where I am, but INSEAD is a global school, and so I can tell you that I spent quite a bit of time on a plane or on a train going back and forth to a variety of locations.
I'm pretty sure. Before we get into the INSEAD thing, it's funny that you said that, because I also came back in 2013 and I saw the same movement, right? You saw all these young people thinking for the first time of becoming global entrepreneurs. And Católica was obviously, and I think that's more or less when we met, probably.
Yes,
10
I
years ago
think
or
some
12
of
years
the
ago.
some of the initiatives that were
I was
promoting
there.
at Católica, I was promoting a lot of that. That's when kind of we were creating a new center in that space. We did a lot of activities. I was very involved with startup.
Yeah, I remember
Lisbon
I
as
spoke
well.
there, and so we met probably through some common friends or something like that, and also at Imperial we had some nice lunches, and you were very excited also because you were in an engineering school, but teaching, doing a program which was more geared towards technology and entrepreneurship.
Yes, I mean, at Imperial we had a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. And one of our flagship programs is a master's in entrepreneurship, which is very successful. But more interestingly, there's Imperial is one of the big forces in the UK and in Europe in terms of tech entrepreneurship and spin-offs. Typically every year, 40 to 50 spin-offs were created out of technology generated and invented at Imperial, either own technology or just ideas that a PhD student, a master's student has. And so our students, not only through our masters, but generally we're very involved with that phenomenon and with the entrepreneurial community across London, which was a very interesting experience, and something that again I supported quite a bit. I mean, we created this scale-up space in the new campus that Imperial has been building in White City, which is a campus all focusing on innovation, entrepreneurship, new tech, and through that, supported a lot of different initiatives on that, including this Institute for Deep Tech that I mentioned.
Of course, London was already by then a huge entrepreneurial capital in Europe. Did you, from your time that you spent here at Católica, compared to London, did you see a little bit of catch up in terms of the Portuguese ecosystem, or do you think that the London ecosystem was moving further ahead and we were staying behind? What impression did you have watching the two ecosystems 10 years ago, before INSEAD?
I think it's hard to understand the speed. As you said, they were in very different eras. I mean, I think in Portugal, as you mentioned, I think the years 2010 to 2020 was really the period where an ecosystem really emerged in Lisbon that didn't exist. There were one experience here or there, but the notion of an ecosystem with different players, incubators, accelerators, venture capital, all of that, and especially an ecosystem that was not only dependent on the public side of things, let's put it this way, only really emerged at that time, which was very interesting. I mean, London is different. I mean, there was already many things going on. It was a matter of also accelerating, creating new funds, new activities. So I think it's difficult to compare because it was more the UK one and London in particular, but it's not just London, of course. The Golden Triangle with Cambridge and Oxford is an important part of that broader ecosystem in the UK, was trying to advance and try to compete more with the US and trying to generate, more unicorns and more, valuable, impactful companies. While in the US, we were kind of creating a stable ground by which some of these could emerge and could contribute and develop. I don't think it's, necessary to be comparing. I think they were all both on their own trajectories. And fortunately, just like when I look at before, I spent 10 years in Pittsburgh, as I was mentioning, and I don't think you need to compare Pittsburgh with Silicon Valley or even New York. I mean, they're all on different tracks because they emerge from different bases and they have different setups. Unfortunately, as we know well, entrepreneurship is not a zero-sum game. Right. You can have entrepreneurial hubs and actually feed off each other. and everybody can benefit, which is an important element. And that, for example, that is very true in the UK. Where people talk about the golden triangle, because the more you have developments in one of these places, the more it feeds off.
It sparks
Why?
competition,
Collaboration. Why? Because, for example, as we know, one of the big issues is funds that are sufficiently specialized and sufficiently knowledgeable across Europe that can invest in certain verticals. And so if you have, say, bio or quantum developing both at Imperial and at Cambridge, that benefits us both level, because that may create an opportunity for a stream of a fund that really knows about quantum that can invest in multiple places. So I think that that's one of the really beneficial elements of having different entrepreneurial hubs emerge, because I definitely do not see that as one feeding off each other on the country. A virtuous cycle can always be built on the back of that. It's the same thing here. If you have a hub here in Portugal and another thing in Porto and Coimbra, I think we can all benefit from that.
Works together. And so then you went to INSEAD. And before we start going into sort of more the entrepreneurial side of the program, a lot of people sometimes ask, is it still worth doing an MBA?
Well, definitely, I believe so. In fact, I think that in this day and age, with things changing very rapidly in terms of technology and organization, some of the skills that you develop at a leading MBA like the one that we have at INSEAD are more valuable than ever, because you learn the fundamental skills, of course, of marketing, management, strategy, but you also learn a lot about leading people, leading change, adaptation, transition, and working with different people and different ideas, which is at the heart of the identity of INSEAD. And so I think that is as valuable or more valuable today than it has ever been in this rhythm of change. And the MBA is a generalist education program. So it's not about being very specific in one or another area, but being able to really lead teams and develop and nurture them, and making sure that they can drive impact and make a difference, whether in an established firm or in an entrepreneurial firm. And so that's really my perspective. And that's what we see. Our alumni are amazingly successful, and we'll get to that in a second, in any walks of life. And this has been one of the distinct pleasures and very, very rewarding, is to see the trajectory, the impact, the dedication of our community and our alumni, and what they do around the world.
And they're successful not only in business and corporate and banking, but actually in entrepreneurship, right? One of the people told me, say, well, actually, if you're an MBA, you don't really know technology. But as you said, people learn so much about management, and tech is not only about tech, it's also about management. And so actually a lot of very successful tech companies were founded by MBAs.
Yes.
From INSEAD and other top schools.
Indeed. So there's a couple of different elements there that I think is worthwhile for us to talk about more generally, and then I'll talk about INSEAD in particular. More generally, is about the role of learning an MBA for an entrepreneur. And we have, amazingly successful entrepreneurs. Just to talk to one that I was with a few weeks ago, and on our board, Fred Mazzella, the founder of BlaBlaCar. He incubated, BlaBlaCar during his time at INSEAD, and has been, an amazing, successful presence in dozens of countries now, and generating a lot of value and abating a lot of carbon, because it's a car sharing platform. So
right.
There's a very important result of that. Or became the founder of EcoVadis, another alum, and many others. And the general point that I want to make is that to start a company, perhaps you don't need an MBA, and the MBA may be not necessarily, the degree that you're going to be thinking immediately, because you're talking about a product and innovation and technology. The issue is if you want to grow that company.
Right.
I mean, if you just want to be a founder, that's right. Maybe not. The value of an MBA is not all that significant. But if you want to grow that company, and that company becomes a unicorn, then you need to understand all of these elements and how they fit together and how they work together. And, very quickly you can be replaced by somebody that has those skills. And so that's an important element of thinking about the development of an entrepreneurial venture. Is not just about the start. You want to create a successful venture. So it's going to start small, but hopefully it's going to become hundreds and hundreds of people and millions of dollars or euros of revenue and profits, and that's the preparation. Exactly. So that's what is important. Now, the reason why that's interesting as it connects to INSEAD is because INSEAD is known as a consulting school. Like if you go around the market and you ask everybody, INSEAD is a consulting school. There is this lingo about the nature of the schools and their identity. Right. And it's true. I mean, we train a lot of people that go into consulting. Right. The two most significant job destinations of our graduates is consulting and tech, by the way. A lot of product. We talked about that already, and it's very valid. But something very interesting has been happening, and for which now we have progressively more data. And the interest is precisely the role of entrepreneurship that is masked under this perception that it exists. And in fact, the first time I noticed that came only a couple of months after I started in September 2023, because PitchBook, released this very interesting data where they went to all the database that they had and said, what are the top MBAs for ventures? And in fact, INSEAD is fourth globally, right after, Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. And you would see, well, it's a consulting school. Then how is it above any other school other than these other three? INSEAD is generating more founders and more VC globally. And then another, the subsequent studies that they did all showed that. And there's no other school on the top 10 in Europe or outside of the US, actually. Right. So that's something that immediately reveals, wait a minute, there's something going on. So on the back of that, we went and asked our alums, hey, tell us about your entrepreneurial experience. And what we've been finding out, which is very interesting, is to say, yes, they go into consulting or perhaps tech right after they graduate, but 5 years on, there's a huge shift in entrepreneurship, And it's not just the traditional entrepreneurship by which you create a digital tech firm that you go out to get VC to grow and all of that.
All sorts of entrepreneurship.
Also MBO, LBO, family firms, buying firms in distress. I mean, all sorts of different entrepreneurial ventures. In fact, we did a survey and about, 70% almost of those that answered, it's a sample, right? A little bit of a biased sample because it was questions about entrepreneurship. They all kind of said, in fact, they're doing this transition. And this is a very interesting phenomena that says that there's more behind what's happening on that phenomena, and that, in fact, many of our alums are leading entrepreneurs in all shapes or forms. And this is something that I've been also feeling, in an ad hoc way, but now that we have a little bit more data to support.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, right? Because actually at the beginning of your career, people tend to try to learn with others, right? Not everybody starts their business at 22 or 23, right? So it's normal that they'd start by having another profession, learning about an industry, finding out which problems need to be solved, and then launch your venture. It's the same thing in all the top schools, and it is true that it's a misconception that MBAs do not launch businesses. For the contrary, most of the successful businesses that stay for the long term and become really long term successful are founded by MBAs from top schools, for sure. And what about the entrepreneurial side itself inside the MBA? This was maybe business schools didn't used to sort of delve much into entrepreneurship, but I'm sure nowadays INSEAD's curriculum is very focused on entrepreneurship as well.
Yes, we have all sorts of offers. First, our Max Center for Entrepreneurship is really the hub of that entrepreneurial activity, and they walk, all of those that are doing our MBA that are interested in these through all sorts of initiatives. You can do pitches, you can develop your venture competitions. We have something called the product games, where you compete with other MBAs from other schools on entrepreneurial ideas. You can develop and get external members of the community to come and evaluate your business plan idea if that's what you want to do. You can basically have all sorts of electives focus on entrepreneurship if that's the direction of travel that you want to go. So it is really something that's very much embedded at INSEAD, because it's actually a founding value, and entrepreneurship is a founding value of INSEAD, and that's why even those that may decide to go in consulting, that they want to have a little bit of a feel for that, can develop those skills specifically, and a fraction of them do start a company right away. But as we were just saying, an important majority of them uses these initiatives to learn a little bit more about entrepreneurial phenomena, to think about what it is, what it takes, how you approach it, and whether or not they do it right away or whether they do it 3 or 4 hours. It helps them a lot to think through that entrepreneurial process and through that entrepreneurial tools, and to be able to push that thought and action forward.
For sure. I can say that it was during my MBA that I thought that at some stage I'd like to launch my own company, in this case a fund. Now, we can't avoid talking about AI. The traditional teaching model of business schools is spectacular. INSEAD, Harvard, and so on. It's a pleasure to be in these schools and to learn. It's just so much fun. But how is AI changing in your case? What are you using now?
I think AI is changing many industries, or almost every industry, and also education. And I have the most positive outlook on what it allows. And I'm already seeing that in action. It's quite, amazing to see how faculty are looking at this. First, on the research side, of course, INSEAD is an intellectual-led school. So we have, as we speak, people that are studying, how you create ventures, that leverage AI. They're studying how the leading AI firms like OpenAI are organizing processes differently because of AI, and how organizations are shifting because of this technology, so that they can bring that to the classroom. That's one part. But the other part is actually changing the way that one teaches. And that means that, the idea of having, say, a bot that supports your learning is already kind of present. We have now a variety of simulations. If you go back to your time at business school, simulations was a little bit clunky, where you still had to make decisions and input decisions. Now, the new simulations have an overlay of an AI agent that make it much more of, you get a board report, just like if you'd be managing a company. Right. So what I think is very interesting with this AI is actually that you can bring to the classroom in a curated, supported way, an environment that is actually closer to the environment that you're going to have once you go and join a company, be it a new firm or an existing firm. So I'm very excited about what it brings and what it allows people to do in the context of the classroom. The classroom is and will change quite rapidly. The traditional case studies, for example, are going to become much more live case studies, where the professor comes and say, oh, we should look at, you study mergers and acquisitions. Why don't we go and let's study today Unilever and look at the spin-off of the ice cream businesses, and they're about to float it. What do you think? It's a good idea. Let's go and look at that. And you create 4 or 5 teams immediately. They go use an AI to explore and see what the analysts are talking about that. And then you can have a live discussion about, is this a good idea or a bad idea on something that's about to happen, as we know. And the fact that you can do that in real time with these tools, I think is actually extremely interesting and very exciting. Now, you have to embrace it. If you think that things are going to stay the same, that's not going to evolve, you're going to disappear. And so in some ways, what everybody says out there, which is, you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you're going to be replaced by somebody that knows how to use AI. That's the reality of education. Schools are not going to disappear because of AI, but schools that don't take AI seriously are going to be replaced,
like any other industry, actually,
by those that are doing a good job and are really integrating it in the way that they operate. And that's certainly the way that we're looking at it. At INSEAD, we have big initiatives already going on, and some others planned to really push this to the edge. And this actually goes back to the way that we start our conversation about the role of MBAs. Industries are going to dramatically change over the next few years. And so you need to understand how to work in this environment, how to lead teams, how to rethink processes, systems, business models, approaches, supply chains. And that's general management.
Absolutely.
And that's what we
Yes.
provide. That's what we help leaders to be prepared for, so that they can thrive and they can create or develop thoughtful, purposeful businesses that can make a difference to business and society.
For sure. I agree. I'm very happy that it's still relevant, being an MBA myself, and I'm very happy that you're a dean of one of the best schools in the world.
Thank you very
Certainly
much.
the best one in Europe. Great to see you here, Francisco.
Likewise, good to see you.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of The Red Chair.